I forgot to actually have my hand there. All right, one more time. Hey, good morning or good evening, and welcome to the Hope Explained podcast, where we look at the sermon that was said on Sunday and look at anything that was left unsaid, forgotten, or cut for time. I'm joined on my opposite sides here by our lead pastor, Rick Morris, and our Hispanic and youth pastor, Daniel Dominguez. Thank you guys for being with me.
Let's go. My very first.
Yeah, that's
My
right.
very first.
Yeah, that's right. It's your very first appearance on the podcast on our very ninth episode.
There we go.
Yes.
So,
Now
and
we're
if you
back
guys
on.
did not watch the sermon on Sunday, that was taught by our founding pastor, Pastor Russ. It was really great. Go back and watch that. You can watch that on our YouTube channel, New Hope Eastlake. So before you listen to this, go make sure that you go listen to that. Now, we've been in a series, and that series is called The Ultimate Comeback. And do you want to, real quick, I know we talked about it last week, but maybe like 2 sentences about what that's about.
Yeah, so really the goal of this series is to help everybody that attends to understand that we can all make a comeback. And we want people to leave thinking that just because things don't go my way in life, or maybe I make a mistake, or like we'll see today, sometimes we have to make a comeback from situations that are not our fault. Where it just gives us hope that we can make a comeback. We serve the God of the second chances, and we want everybody to feel empowered and strengthened and encouraged that even when we're at our lowest point, God can still bring us back.
And last week we talked about
Thief on the cross.
Thief on the cross. Thank you. I know I'm tracking 3 things right now. This is my challenge week.
Our children's pastor needs to use his listening
I
ears.
know. I need to put on my listening cap. Quiet coyote. No, but last week we talked about Thief on the cross, and this week we talked about Joseph. And I think that a really good review point for that would be the background of Joseph, because I think that you can kind of segment the story of Joseph into 2 big areas, which is when he's with his brothers and they sell him, and then his time in Egypt. Do you want to talk about the background there?
Yeah, Joseph's story it may be the greatest comeback story in the Bible.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, your own family sells you, your own brothers who are jealous of you. Everybody knows the story. I think they're probably familiar, but he's sold into slavery. They don't like him. He's the little annoying brother. He's cocky. His dad favors him. His brothers decide they're going to kill him. And then they're like, well, let's not kill him. Let's have mercy. We'll sell him. So, they sell him to these Egyptian travelers. Joseph ends up in Egypt. And so right there, he has to make a comeback. He's young. He's a teenager. And, he has a good attitude. He ends up becoming an important part of Potiphar's household. He's falsely accused of rape by Potiphar's wife, who likes him and wants him. And Joseph does the right thing, and she accuses him of rape, and he's thrown in the jail. And he is in jail for a long time, and he was supposed to get out, but he was forgotten. So he ends up staying in jail again, and then he finally gets out of jail. And then that second part is there's this big famine in the land. Joseph ends up being, like the number 2 to Pharaoh. And God uses him to do some incredible things to save food. And his family comes calling because they need food, and Joseph's in charge. It's a crazy story.
You go back there, like he was good looking. It wasn't his fault. He was born like that. You're like,
Some of us,
hello.
Hey.
we can relate.
That's why you chose the story, right?
Definitely.
That was the part that got it to come through.
Well, that's why I had Pastor Russ teach it and not me.
Oh, wow.
Oh, got it. But the thing that we want to focus on today is that the story of Joseph, specifically the comeback of Joseph, is pretty unique. And I know that's kind of the lead-in that you wanted to go with there. So what did you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think, and Daniel, you can touch on it, I think the difference between what we talked about last week, where the thief on the cross was on the cross because of his own choices. He, made major mistakes. He was paying for his crime, and he had to make a comeback because of his own choices. Joseph didn't do anything wrong. Joseph did the right thing. Not only did he not do anything wrong, he did the right thing, and it still landed him in trouble, where his world fell apart around him, and he still needed to make a comeback. So
yeah, being a good son, being a good brother, like even I know sometimes it's like, why did you say this story about the dream that they're gonna be bowing into you and all that? That's what you think, like, oh, that's why this happened. But still, like, he was an amazing guy, and still these brothers are like jealous. Why? Because his father loved him more, you can say, but that's not his fault. We go back to not his fault, not his fault, not his fault. But he's always going down, going down, going down, going down until you see this overcoming story, like the best that I ever heard from the Bible. Like, because he's always doing the good, and still bad things are happening to him. And you're like, where is God in this? How many times us as people, as coming to church and everything, as Christians, God, I'm serving you so much, and here it is, my kids, they're going down and all that. And I'm like, no, let's be trusting God. God has a plan for you, and that's for me like something that comes over this story, like the resilience and overcoming from that.
Yeah, and it's like the big question that we always have is like, why do bad things happen to good people? And this is Joseph's story. But I think it's important to point out, that Joseph did nothing wrong and still had to make a comeback. So sometimes we have to make a comeback, not because of choices we make, but because of choices that other people make, and it puts us in a bad position. And Joseph could have went a lot of different directions with his attitude, with his life, even with the way he viewed God, and he didn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you said, why do bad things happen to good people? And one of the ways that I like to think about that question is, well, how do you know they're a good person unless you've seen them in those kind of moments? And you never really see somebody's true character until you've seen them either when they've had things taken away from them, or they're under incredible stress, or you could name a handful of different scenarios where when you watch that person, or when they think nobody's looking, right? And I think that we tick off most of those boxes with the story of Joseph, and we see that character, and that's that character that led to that comeback. And something that you said right before the podcast was he didn't allow his outside circumstances to dictate his internal attitudes. He knew who he was, and he stuck to those guns. And I think that's why we got the story.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, I mean, we all do it, where we allow outside circumstances to dictate the way we view God, the way we respond to other people. And, it's kind of the old psychological adage of nobody can put you in a bad mood, but it does happen. I mean,
Sometimes.
we all allow that, but Joseph, for whatever reason, he had every right to be angry, every right to seek revenge, every right to get mad at God.
Yeah.
And he never did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just going back to that, like being mad at God, like I told you, like I'm serving you, I'm doing this, I'm being faithful. Like he's a Jewish, so he's praying all the time into Yahweh and all that, and it was like, still, I'm still praying and everything. I'll keep on going, but just to see like from all his story, and I don't see any part of the Bible saying I hate you.
Yeah.
Why does this happen to me? Why? No. Like we see other characters and they're like, why me? He never put himself, like the me wasn't there. He was like, there's a purpose of this coming. And I love, we sing all the time, like see a victory. You turn what it meant to evil, you turn it to good. And that's how he ended the praise to his brothers.
Yeah.
Like that seed of forgiveness for all those years, and bring that seed of forgiveness, that's the overcome for me. Like, wow. Like you said, after that, he gives them land, he gives them all that they shouldn't. They should be dead as people, as a judge or something. It's like, you sold your brother. You were going to kill him.
Yeah.
It's not even selling them and all that, but just to see what they did to him and still show him forgiveness, that's our God. That's the heart of God.
How many times do we do this, like all of us, where, we get a raise, we get a new car,
Oh, yeah.
our health's good, whatever it is, and we're like, oh, God's blessing us. God's blessings are upon us. God is doing good things in our lives. Well, how many times have we ever said, when life is going horrible for us, when we can't pay our bills, when we lose our job, when people treat us bad, when things aren't working out, how many times do we still say God's good? God's blessing us. God's only blessing us when things are going our way. And yet we don't have that same perception of God when things are not going our way. But Joseph did.
Yeah.
That's what's crazy.
Going back to that, if you can look at YouTube and our past series, Being Great When Life Is Not, please go to YouTube. You can see how you overcome it. Being great when life is not, when my friends are being killed while they're being hanged, all that stuff. And still more Christians are getting together. Unity is coming, and just showing Jesus and the love of Jesus into everyone. And that's the overcome. Like, being great when life is not, that's the theme.
Yeah, it's amazing because Joseph was, we forget how young he was. Like, he wasn't this mature 50-year-old adult. He was a teenager when this initially happened. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's a common motif in the Bible, because it's like we had the same exact comments with the character of Mary, for example.
Yeah.
And so spiritual maturity is not, it's there isn't a causation there between age.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. The other thing that is interesting about it, though, is like with something else that differentiates it with the thief and the cross is, for the thief on the cross, that was his comeback. But through Joseph and what he did, his comeback impacted everybody, because it wasn't just his getting better. It wasn't just his rising in station. Like you were talking about earlier. It was through Joseph and where God had put him through that comeback that he provided a comeback for a whole nation.
Yeah. I mean, check this out. So Joseph is falsely accused of rape. Not only did he not rape, he literally tried to do the right thing. Potiphar's wife comes on to him sexually. He runs. She grabs a piece of his robe to try to bring him back. He leaves, does the right thing, and then she says, "Oh, look, I have his robe. He tried to rape me." And he's thrown into jail. And Joseph stayed faithful to his calling, to God, even in jail. He was in jail, and the cupbearer who was getting out was supposed to remember him and forgot all about him. So he stayed another several years in jail. And then when Pharaoh was having these dreams, because Joseph was faithful to God in jail, he didn't allow anger to control him. He didn't allow resentment to control him. He didn't allow hate to control him. He didn't get mad at God. He still was being used by God and had a good attitude in jail. I'm sure every day wasn't a great day, but he still was allowing God to use him. And because of that, that cupbearer remembered, oh, I remember a guy I was in prison with who can interpret dreams, because he was still using his gifts that God gave him. And then that's how Joseph ends up getting out of jail. And so he makes a comeback. His comeback, a lot of times we think, well, the comeback came when he got out of jail. No, the comeback came while he was in jail. He made a comeback in jail with his attitude and his mindset. And then he got out, and his comeback wasn't just about him. It positively impacted Pharaoh and the entire nation of the entire country of Egypt. They were blessed because of Joseph. They were the only ones that had food in this, the famine was in the entire area. So not only did his faithfulness and his comeback impact Egypt, it impacted Pharaoh, but we know this because of his story. And Daniel, if you wanted to talk about it, his brothers and his family who were a part of that famine needed food. And where are they going to come to get food?
To Egypt, to him, to Joseph. And they come back, and that's what I was saying, like forgiveness comes. But first it wasn't forgiveness. It was like, whoa, my brothers are here. And it's, that feeling, let's be real. Like humans is like, you guys sold me. You guys.
He could have killed them.
Yeah, literally. He like, that's it. You know how. But
they didn't recognize him, and he could have had them killed easily.
Exactly, and then Benjamin comes on the story as well. Like little brother, where's my little brother? It's, and I mean when you see that, and they're still like bowing into him. The dream that God gave him and everything that day happened. That day happened and then it's like you can just say, that's it, you're out. I don't want you in the kingdom. You can say like that, like if you're going to be part of the kingdom of Egypt with your mindset, selling me and everything, you're not worth it. You shouldn't be here in Egypt. But there's forgiveness. Come to Egypt. I'll give you land. I'll give you all this. And I don't know.
That's an incredible moment because his brothers didn't recognize him. He knew who they were.
Yeah.
And when he revealed himself, they literally dropped down, just like what Pastor Daniel said, because they were begging for they thought, we're dead.
We're dead.
Yeah.
We are dead. And yet they didn't know that Joseph had already made a comeback.
Yeah.
He had already forgiven them, even though it hurt him. They end up being blessed because of his comeback.
Yeah.
He offers to move all of them, his father, all of their kids, their wives, gives them land, and provides for them, even though they're the ones that left him for dead pretty much.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's the most amazing comeback story, or one of the most amazing comeback stories other than the one we're going to see on Easter Sunday. But that's an incredible comeback story of Joseph, not only overcoming what he did, but to me it's more the emotional, the mental side, that he did nothing wrong, and was a victim horribly, and endured no telling all those years in jail. And yet he still was used by God and made a massive comeback.
Yeah, and I think you can encourage perseverance. That's the number one thing. No matter how the things looked, he still keep on going. Like if we see the story when he goes to Potiphar, it doesn't say how many years he was cleaning, like floors or what he was doing. He wasn't the right hand at the moment. Potiphar saw him, and he's like, oh, he brings good into what I have.
Yeah.
So it's just to be faithful and have perseverance of what God is in with you.
Yeah.
Your attitude determines your altitude, for sure.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, something that you said was that got me thinking just now was the idea that the comeback happened in the prison. It wasn't the process of getting out of the prison; it was during. And something that reminded me of was, if you read, it talks about how God was with him in those moments. God touched the warden to be nicer to Joseph. We don't know how much, but God was with him, and I doubt that God came to him and was like, hey, by the way, talk to the warden for you. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of those things where we can take solace in how God reveals his character in this story. Because like you said, Joseph did nothing wrong. Like, this is him being thrown in prison was outright unjust. And in that moment, yes, it sucked. Like, there's no telling what actually happened to him.
Yeah.
But in that moment, God was with him through and through.
Yeah.
And
I'm thinking, Jason, of people that might be listening that have had horrible things happen to them. That wasn't their fault. They were a victim of somebody else's horrible choices or just circumstances of life. They received a diagnosis. That's horrible.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything wrong. Life just happened to them. And I think this story gives people a ton of hope of the fact that I don't have to succumb to my circumstances. I don't have to be what happened to me. I don't have to be defined by what has happened to me in my life, whether somebody else did something to me or something just happened to me. I can make a comeback regardless of the circumstances that go down in my life. And I think it's important to know too, and for people to understand that just because bad things happen to you, it doesn't mean you did something wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially in the church world, and this frustrates me, we kind of equate how life goes with how close we are to God, or whether God's mad at us or judging us or whatever. Joseph was a man of God. He did everything right and still had horrible things happen to him. And so that notion of, well, you must not be walking with God, or you did something to deserve what happened to you, that is, I don't want to say the Greek word for it. That's
Aramaic.
That's baloney. That's baloney. Like, that is, explanation point, question mark, asterisk, whatever you want to say. That's baloney, because that's not true.
Yeah, and sometimes, like on the church world, it's like, oh, you don't have faith. That's why it's happening to you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, bro, my faith is all the way over here. You know what I've been passing through, and it's like, that's why you need a healthy church around you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
healthy leaders. And I don't know, it's been a lot of, let me say this, a lot of comeback stories haven't happened because of church, because of leaders that don't know how to guide them. People
It's
spiritually.
spiritual abuse.
Yeah.
It's spiritual abuse.
And
It
they
is.
stay there and they're like, oh, I hate God, I hate church. That's it.
Yeah.
But if there's leaders, and healthy people around you reading the Bible, it was showing you what the Word of God is showing, and then it's like, this is my comeback story.
No, that's a great point, Daniel. That is a great point.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on before we wrap up here?
I can say I think the story of Joseph is such an inspiration to all of us. Joseph's mindset, his perspective, his attitude, and like what Pastor Daniel mentioned a little bit earlier, Joseph said to his brothers, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. And so we can kind of change the viewpoint and say, okay, God knew Joseph's character. He knew Joseph would have never been in the position that he was in without going through what he went through. And so sometimes we question why we're going through stuff, and maybe it's because God has a greater purpose than what we can think of in the short term.
Yeah.
And so I just hope that this story is encouraging to people, and hopefully it encourages people to try and to make a comeback, and that they can make a comeback.
When I was preparing my preaching, I was like looking around books and everything, and this one came, The Joseph Principles by Stephen K. Scott, Turning Adversity and Heartache into Miracles Living. And today we did it at staff meeting, but it's just treasure hunting from your trials, from bad stuff that happened to you, and just bring those diamonds from there. And it's just, that's chapter 1 from the book.
Yeah.
And it's incredible because you heal about, sometimes you're like looking for your overcoming and everything, and it's going to happen, but you have to heal as well. Like Joseph healed from his brothers. He was like, I'm going to forgive them even though whatever happened, because my loving Father, God. And if you go into that, always being with God, always having that relationship with God will change everything. And even though you're passing through any bad things and all this, you see the good in it because you have an amazing God and a good Father. Sometimes we don't represent as good fathers in earth, but we have a good Father in heaven.
Yeah, that's good. Everything stems from knowing the character of God
Exactly.
through our relationship with Him.
Exactly.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here on the very 9th episode. Appreciate it greatly. And for those of you watching, if you did not watch on Sunday, we would encourage you to go to the New Hope Eastlake channel. And also, we have Easter coming up right around the corner.
Oh, yeah.
Do.
It's coming up real quick.
Really?
Yeah.
Really quick.
And so we would love to invite you to Easter. So if you're in the Chula Vista area,
4 services.
4 services, that's right. We've got 8, 10, 12, and then we have a Spanish service at 2
2 de la
o'clock.
tarde en español.
Sí.
12 le pasa ser español. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
talking in tongues right now.
But please come. We are on 2720 Olympic Parkway. And if you haven't noticed, I am wearing
Jason, why are you wearing an
was gonna
astronaut
ask.
suit?
You were going to... Thank you.
I was
Yeah.
going to ask you.
Yeah,
You
I
look
know.
so good today.
Thank you. Yeah, I've decided to
To
wear it every day.
infinity.
Yes.
And beyond.
Yeah. We just announced our Liftoff VBS is going to be a traditional VBS Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. So if you have kids, please sign them up. It's going to be a really great week of story, of themes, of Bible stories, games, and lots of sun in the summer. And it's space themed. It's going
Should
to be
we
real
build
cool.
one of those things out in the parking lot and put Jason in it and shoot
Oh,
him
what?
off?
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like build a human launcher. That would be fun.
I think our
Where-
safety team might veto that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
just
Maybe
saying.
that's not a good
Dana.
idea.
Yeah.
Ask Dana.
And I would veto that. So, but we have really cool things in the works for that. So please sign up. You can find information on the website. But other than that, thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Yes.